welcome to the Jester's Court. I am your host, Mike. No Mom Thulu tonight, but a little bit later we will be joined by the amazing Derek Diamond. Before we get into that, though, I do want to take a moment to shout out our awesome patrons. We have Mr. Kyle Keir, our founder, Derek Diamond, Robert Hood, Rob Mann, and the awesome Carlos Longoria, otherwise known as I Am Rampage. You too can be a patron. Just head on over to patreon.com/the Jester's Court. Tiers start as low as $3 a month, and you get access to cool stuff like monthly commentary tracks, Saturday morning cartoons, and whatever weird stuff that I decided to put in. A few months ago, we did an interview with Mr. Jason Robbins. So for our topic tonight, I want to tell a story. Imagine you're 9 years old. You recently got your very own NES. You've been playing the hell out of Mario Brothers and a little gem called The Legend of Zelda. But what's this you see at the video store? A new Super Mario Bros. 2 gleaming on the shelf. Well, no need to look further. This is the game we're going to be renting this weekend. You get home and pop it in, and what the hell is this? That tragic story is the topic for tonight, where we're going to be discussing Super Mario Bros. 2. Stay tuned. All right, so we are back, and with me, as promised, is Mr. Derek Diamond. Derek is a patron of the show, a filmmaker, and he has his own podcast, feature presentation, and the Nerd Cave Retro. Nerd Cave Retro is actually what makes him perfect for this episode tonight. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me back on the show.
Absolutely. Anytime we can get you guys on. Especially if we're talking about retro gaming. I mean, it's got to be you or Jason.
Yeah, we've kind of cornered the market on that, I suppose. Or at least our show's been, I think, one of the longest running retro gaming podcasts that is still going out there, because when we started the show, we're actually coming up on the 6-year anniversary of when we started Nerd Cave Retro. It was in middle of July. And at that time, neither of us knew of any retro gaming shows. So then Jason had the idea, well, why don't we do one? And, here we are 6 years and almost 300 episodes later.
Yeah, you have a massive backlog. At one point, I decided I was going to go back and listen to it all. I made it about 2 years back. I'm not going to lie. And then I was like, okay, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, no, it's funny going back sometimes, because every now and then I'll go back and I'll look and listen to some of those old shows. And it's interesting thinking, what a different place Jason and I were in. And, since then we've met, some great listeners that we have, like you, Carlos Longoria, or AKA Rampage, so many other, people, Tyler Watson, Brandon Rutledge, who listen to our show that we wouldn't have met otherwise.
We mentioned Rampage when we did the group episode last week with the open micers and Innsmouth, and he was in the chat. He is like the thread that just ties all of our shows together. Rampage is the best.
No, Rampage is great.
And he gets an apology shout out because he'll be on this episode, but he actually subscribed as a patron, and our Ghostbusters episode was already recorded, so he's got to wait 2 weeks for his shout out.
Well, he gets twice the shout out here.
So tonight we are talking about Super Mario Bros. 2.
Yeah, little known. Well, it's not little known, but actually what I consider to be a very underrated game, which I'm sure we'll get into.
It is underrated, but I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of that's come back around to the positive side. Essentially, what we're doing tonight is it's a weird format, because we're not really arguing against current complaints. We're arguing against 9-year-old Mike's complaints. And in the process of this, I've replayed the game, and we're going to talk about that experience. And yeah, so it's going to be a new, looser format for this episode.
Yeah.
So we have we're slightly different ages, I guess is the way to put that. So for me, I played this game shortly after it was released. We rented it and we played it. You again are a little younger. How did you actually come about this game?
So my experience with the NES was actually quite limited when I was younger. So I was born in '86. So the NES had already been out, for a year in the States. And I didn't own an NES. My first console I ever had was a Super Nintendo. But I would get dropped off at my aunt's house after school, and I would play the NES at her house while I would wait for my mom to pick me up when she got off work. And there were 3 games that she owned: the Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt combo, Legend of Zelda, the original, and Super Mario Brothers 2. And I don't want to knock the original Super Mario Brothers because I think it's one of the most important games of all time. Like we wouldn't have the most iconic video game character, and video games just wouldn't be the same if not for Super Mario Brothers. But I got to be honest, when I was a kid, I enjoyed playing Super Mario Brothers 2 more. I knew it was different, but when you're a kid, at least when I was a kid, I didn't really think of that. I'm like, oh, it's just, it's a sequel. Maybe they're trying new stuff. And then, Mario Brothers 3 came out and it went back to that original Mario Brothers formula where you're attacking Koopa Troopas and Goombas and all this, and all that jazz. But I'll be honest. I went back a few months ago and I played Mario Brothers 2 for the first time from start to finish, not using any warp points. And I can honestly say it's one of my favorite Mario games.
Can I confess one of my favorite things about playing old games on Switch?
Mm-hmm.
Rewind.
Yes.
So many
and
times.
You can save.
So many times where before you would just have to start from the beginning, like, okay, remember this guy here? Nope, I can just hit rewind and let's try that again.
Yeah, like that didn't happen.
No, not at all.
No, not at all.
I was using it not on the Switch, but I was playing Mega Man 2 for a stream a few months ago, a charity stream, and I used that rewind way more than I even care to admit.
I don't use it probably as much as I should, but I think it's a great feature to have. I just love the luxury if you're playing the NES version that you just turn your Switch off and then you can come back and boom, you're right where you were.
Well, because we're all, I mean, even you with your limited experience with NES, we're all old enough to remember having to leave a game running for like 6 hours. Like I have to go sleep or mom wants me to come to dinner and you can't save. So you just turn the TV off and hope your mom doesn't notice the red light on the Nintendo.
Well, there were still some Super Nintendo games that were like that too, that you couldn't save. Or, as Jason and I call it, the dreaded password system, where you have to write down a certain number of, like a combination of letters and numbers and hope you don't lose your notebook or your sheet of paper. Otherwise, you're starting all the way back from the beginning.
Speaking of Mega Man 2, that was what it had instead of save files.
Mm-hmm.
It was coded system that like said how many things you had in your inventory, what you've beaten. But I think you touched on it pretty good. The biggest thing I think with this game was sticker shock. It was different, and of course we know now that it's different because Japan didn't think that we could handle the actual Mario 2, so we got Doki Doki Panic.
Which, if you go back, because now you can play the Japanese version of Mario Brothers 2. It's on the Switch. It was released on the Mario Brothers All-Star compilation for the Super Nintendo in the 90s. I don't know if you've ever played it, but it is insane.
I have not.
I'm truly convinced that the developers of that game hate children, and they're just evil people.
When you get late into the NES and early Super NES, most of the developers just hated children. Those games were hard.
And this is, I tried playing it again a few months ago when we first started talking about, doing this specific episode. I knew I was going to go back and play the Doki Doki Panic, or it's in Japan, it was called Mario Brothers USA.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, you know what? I didn't really give the true Mario Brothers 2, or in this case, the Lost Levels, a fair shot. After about 10 minutes, I just said, I can't do it. It's just so, I can't really put into words how frustratingly hard this game is.
I've found as an adult, I don't like the timing jumps kind of games. As when we were kids, it's all you had. But as with what we got now, I like, role-playing games. I like puzzlers. I don't like having the time, a platform is about to disappear and I got to jump onto the next platform. I want to throw my controller across the room.
Yeah, it's, and I love platform games. It's still probably my favorite genre, but you can make a game so difficult that you'd consider it to be broken. Mario Brothers 2 or the Lost Levels is broken.
Yeah, not this Mario 2.
Yeah, no, not this Mario 2. And it's crazy to think, and I'm sure we'll get into more specifics, as the conversation goes on. But if you think if Mario Brothers 2 had not been released, we wouldn't have gotten characters like Birdo or the Shy Guys that are prominently known in the Mario universe.
Yeah, and
These characters would not exist if not for this game.
I think Mario 3 coming out so soon did it a disservice as well, because had Mario 3 not come out when it did, I probably would have gone back and played this more as a kid. But, so soon after this came out, you got Mario 3, and Mario 3 was like my jam.
Well, and Mario 3 is regarded as arguably the best 2D Mario game ever made. It's the debate between that and Super Mario World. But when it comes to the NES era, to me, it's still by far the best of the Mario trilogy. But it is unfair to 2, the fact that 3 was released, so soon after, and the fact that it was as good as it was.
Yeah, because, conversely, Zelda 2, which I still hate to this day,
Yep.
you had a long time to play with that Zelda 2. It was well established, its badness. You just didn't have the time to play this one. And I'm looking back, playing it now as an adult, I was overthinking this game. Because part of my problem when I was playing it as a kid is I couldn't figure out stuff like you go in the door and the little shadow thing. And in my mind, I'm like, well, where'd I end up? It's the same place. You just flipped back. But I'm trying to overthink it. Like, where did I go? Is that like a new level now? Where am I doing? Like, and I didn't know what was going on. And 9-year-old me was like, screw that. And then you can't jump on the bad guys and kill them. You can jump on the bad guys, but you just ride on top of them.
Have you gone back and watched any Doki Doki Panic gameplay?
I've seen a little bit just in my research for this, but not a whole lot.
It's kind of mind-blowing. Since you've played Mario Brothers 2, if you go back and watch Doki Doki Panic, because I'd be curious to actually play it at some point. I went back and watched some gameplay earlier today. It's really mind-blowing because the characters look so different as far as the playable ones because they're not Mario, but like the levels look exactly the same. The Shy Guys are there. All the other villains are there, like Mouser, all those. It's really kind of surreal.
It's essentially just a reskin. I mean, they just put new paint on the top of it, so that makes total sense.
And it is different than Super Mario Brothers and Mario Brothers 3, but I don't think it's so drastically different that, like I said, when I played it as a kid, I thought they were just, trying new things. Like I knew about Zelda 2 and I knew that it was different. So I just figured this was kind of the same thing. And it's funny you mentioned Zelda 2 because that game is pretty widely disliked. To me, rightfully so, because then you took an element that was not involved in the original Zelda at all. Like Mario Brothers 2 is still a platformer at its core. Like it's not a completely different type of gameplay. Zelda 2 is. You add that side-scrolling and platforming type that's just not... It has no real place in Zelda to me.
And I could actually deal with that as an offshoot, like a one-off, but it's so and not hard in like you can't figure out stuff, but hard as in when you die, you don't go to the beginning of the temple. You don't resurrect right there. You go all the way back to the very beginning, and there's something so defeatist about having to I gotta go back across the whole land again.
Yeah, that overworld was so frustrating too. But I don't want to spend your show complaining about Zelda 2. We're here to praise Super Mario Bros.
We could
2.
do a whole show up.
Yeah. So, I feel like, though, that would be like the purpose of your show.
It should be like a Halloween episode, where we're doing opposites. Like, let's just trash Zelda 2.
If you do that, I'll be down.
That was on the fly, but that may have to become a thing.
So what do you think? Let me know and I'll do it.
What do you think? So this is the only Zelda game. So Zelda on the brain. The only Mario game where Bowser is not a bad guy. What do you think about our Frog Kai?
Jason and I have been talking about this on Nerd Cave Retro. I would love if they brought Wart back for like a one-off because he hasn't appeared in any other Mario game, to my knowledge, since Mario Brothers 2. And you know what? I liked the change of pace and spoilers for those who haven't played the game through completely. The whole thing is a dream. Like the ending is literally Mario waking up in his bed, and the whole thing was a dream.
So a little victory scene float, in a little bubble over his head.
Yeah, but to be honest, I liked the new Mario villains because you had Wart as your primary villain. He's the Bowser of this game. Then you had Mouser, who is a bomb-throwing mouse who wears sunglasses. You had, I think his name's Fry Guy, the giant the giant fireball. Then you had Triclyde, the three-headed snake, and I can't remember if there were any other boss characters because I know you had to fight some of them twice.
Well, the first few levels, it's just Birdo. I mean,
Yeah, just Birdo. Yeah.
who you think you're rocking along with Birdo, like yeah, I got this, and then you start getting the more complicated ones. Like I forget the name, and you just said it, but the three-headed snake.
Triclyde.
Oh god, the first time I played him, that was not fun.
I was just like, oh my god, that's such a cool looking snake, and then he killed me.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things too that when you actually get through it the right and beat him, you feel amazing because you're just jumping around. You jump up and back. Like I would either use Luigi or the princess so I could float. And you just feel so cool. You're like, haha, look how cool that was. I did a back thing. And
well, that was what was cool too, was that, and I found out for those who want to learn more about like the history of Mario Brothers 2, the gaming historian did a great documentary on the story behind Super Mario Brothers 2. I, for the longest time, thought that this was the game that introduced like Luigi's different abilities, with him being able to jump higher, but he doesn't have as much traction as Mario does. That was actually introduced in the Japanese version of Mario 2 that was made for the Famicom disk system.
Well, so it's still Mario 2.
Yeah. So this to the American audience introduced, Princess Toadstool as a playable character, which I thought was cool. You had Toad. Everybody knows Toad. You had to rescue him several times before you actually got to the princess in Super Mario Brothers. And then you had Luigi, but in Mario Brothers 1, Luigi was the same. He was just Mario with a different set of overalls.
Identical.
Yep.
In this one, he's a little taller. It's the shirt in this one that both their overalls are blue now, but their shirts are different colors. But he's an actual different character, and I think this is one of the first. I know it's the first Mario, but I think it's one of the first games where you had a choice between characters with different abilities. Like I could play as this guy and it does this, or I could play as her and she floats. Or I don't think that was something you saw before this.
No, I don't think so. And the cool thing was that Mario was like your all-around average, like balanced character. Luigi, you could jump high, but again, he had no. It's almost like he was walking on ice. You had little traction as far as walking. Toad was your fast character. Like if you want to pick stuff up quickly and throw it quickly, Toad's just your speed character. And then with the princess, she's the slowest, but as you mentioned, she has the ability to float,
which made her my favorite go-to.
So, and I tell people, if you just start out playing Mario Brothers 2, it's a good idea to start with the princess because you can float. And once you learn like how the levels are laid out, where all the enemies are and everything, then you can switch to Toad or any other characters. It's funny because usually Mario's my go-to character with like Mario Kart and the multiplayer games, but I rarely, if ever, use Mario in this game. I use either the princess or Toad.
No, because like you said, he's generic, and most of these levels, once you get further into the game, you could beat it with anyone, but they're geared towards a specific, like it's easier if you play it with Luigi, it's easier if you play this with Toad. So I mean, I very rarely use Mario either. I did it first because I forgot about that dynamic, but once I switched around, I was like, oh yeah, they do different things.
Well, and when you learn the layouts of levels and where you can find the warp points to jump ahead farther in the game, there's one, I think it's in Zone 5, where you can jump ahead to World 7, which is the final level. You can only get to that warp point if you use Luigi, because he's the only one who can jump up high enough.
Right.
But the cool thing is, like, say if you don't know that and then you die, you can just switch to Luigi, and the cool thing is it's right at the beginning of the level too. It's one of those, you start out in this little cave and you climb up a ladder and then you're in the open world area, and like right above you is the pipe that takes you to Zone 7.
Well, in Mario 3, the very first level you play in, 1-1, there's a secret exit. I don't remember if it's a warp point, but I remember there's a hill you can duck behind, and it gets you something.
It gives you I think it gives you the first warp whistle.
So it is a warp point, yeah.
Yeah, because there's 3 whistles you can find in Mario 3, because each of them take you to like different options. Like the first one, you can go to either World 2, 3, or 4, and then the other is like 5, 6, 7, and you have to find the specific one. I think it's in World 2 that takes you to, like Bowser's Kingdom or whatever whatever it was called. So yeah, there's some cool warp points in Mario 2. If you want a real challenge, I would say try and play it from start to finish. But if you just want to get through it kind of quickly, there's plenty of tutorials and strategy guides where you can find the actual warp points. But part of the fun is discovering them yourself,
just randomly.
Yeah, because there's one, I think it's in 1-3 that takes you to World 4, and you find the potion that takes you to like the subworld, and then you carry it all the way to the end before you like fall off a cliff or whatever, and there's a pipe that you can't go in if you're in the normal world, but then when you go into the subworld, you can go into it, and you're just like, what?
So you were talking about compared to Doki Doki. There is one very notable difference. While we're talking about each level being like a little more advantage to each player, Doki Doki Panic, to beat the game, you have to beat every level with every character.
Yeah, I saw that, and after that, I was like, you know what? I'll give the game a try just because I want to see if it feels any different than Mario 2, but that's a lot to ask.
It's a lot of repetitive. In a game that you're already repeating yourself as you die anyway.
Yeah, and there's not a ton I know about Doki Doki Panic other than it was used to make Mario 2. But one day I would like to actually sit down and try to play it. Just to say that I have.
The completionist me wants to play everything. I mean, I actively. As a matter of fact, we were talking about Zelda 2, and you guys famously called Aguileros what Zelda 2 should have been. It's sitting on my Steam. I bought it as soon as I heard that episode, and I haven't played it yet. But
it's such a good game.
It's on my list. So
it has that classic Nintendo difficulty. So I'll forewarn you on that. Like it starts.
I heard the review.
The final boss. Like, I don't think I even landed a single hit on the final boss the first time I played it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just put it down and I'm going to come back to it. And I haven't done it since.
I found myself.
It's a very good game.
I found myself telling my son that advice. Like, listen, I've been where you are, because he gets so mad. I'm like, just put the game down, walk away. I can't tell you how many times I thought, this is impossible. I'm destroying this system. And then I come back the next day and do it the first try. Like, what was so hard?
Sometimes you just have to take a mental step back.
I'm sorry, you said that, and then my mind went straight to sometimes you feel like a nut.
Oh.
Almond Joy is not a sponsor, but you could be.
I haven't had an Almond Joy in forever.
No,
I do like Almond Joys though.
This is going to ruin our sponsorship chances, but no one picks Almond Joy. It's it's what's left over.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you the last time I had an Almond Joy.
So I think tally time. What do you think works for the game?
I think what works for it is the different dynamic between the characters and being able to, have a lot of replayability. Because, if you play through the game with Mario, you might think, hey, now I'll play through it with Luigi, or I'll play through it with Princess Peach. I think it has great replayability first and foremost. And I think, the graphics are pretty good. Like, it's pretty standard for NES era. The music can be a little repetitive, though I do like it. Like that overworld theme, the dun, 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 like it's pretty iconic to me when it comes to Mario music. I know it's not the most known track, but
it was stuck in my head the whole time I was playing this game. Like it was all day.
Yeah. And I like the boss theme too. The dun, 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 dun. It's just so fast where I'm like almost kind of moving to the music as I'm playing it on my Switch. So the music's pretty good. But yeah, I'd say the biggest takeaway I would say as far as the high point would be it's different enough from the rest of the Mario franchise, but it's not a vastly different type of game. That platforming aspect is still there. And they did add the star that you can get once you collect a certain number of cherries. So you still have that little bit of a Mario feel to it, even though the enemies are different. Bowser's not involved.
But to me,
But
sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but the
yeah,
bosses to me, this is where adult Mike is looking at young Mike saying, "Play the game and stop complaining." Because in the first Mario Brothers, the bosses weren't really. You just ran past them, ran under them, jumped over them, grabbed the little axe, and that was it. These you actually had to try, and some of them were difficult. Some of them how they had the levels arranged so you couldn't jump where you wanted to jump, and they were downright difficult.
yeah,
But
there's actual strategy involved.
yeah, not just let's run past them and grab. I guess it's supposed to be a switch, but in my mind that was always an axe
Well, it looks like an axe.
at the end of the
I always
bridge.
thought it was an axe.
I'm just thinking
Like
about it logically now. Like that's probably supposed to be a switch.
you can fight Bowser if you have the fire flower, but why do that when you can just jump over him or run under him and just grab the axe and you're done?
It's
Like
even
there's a little bit of strategy, but not really.
right. Well, this one even had more strategy than I think three, because three you couldn't just run past them; you had to jump on their heads.
Mhm.
But it was just jumping on their heads, and to me that was a lot easier than. So again, some of these, especially when you had the fast eggs versus the slow eggs versus oh my god that one's fire. How many times before you learned a pattern did you jump on top of fire trying to pick it up and it's whoops?
Well, then the fun ones were, I think it was the green version of Birdo, where he spits nothing but fireballs. So then you have to grab the little mushroom blocks and use those.
And then you had that moment of like before you figured that out, like what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, like how am I supposed to beat this thing? And then you just pick up the block and throw it at him. You're like, oh, I'm an idiot.
So basically, 9-year-old Mike needs to play this game again. We need to go back in time, and I think I would have enjoyed it. But that's pretty much all I had on the game itself. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. I'm hoping to end with enough time so that Mr. Diamond can talk about some of his projects.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I have extra fun facts today. There was tons of fun facts on this game. So
Okay.
if you are ready, sir, let's talk about some fun facts.
Yeah, let's do it.
You actually already mentioned one, and my first one that was the whole game was a dream. So that was not everyone. People like me who didn't finish the game back in the beginning didn't know that unless you Googled it. Um, let me see if there's anything that we didn't mention because there's an article that was along with this. No, it's pretty much what we talked about. Entire game takes place in the mysterious land of Subcom, which is a play on the word subconscious, which I didn't pick that up at all. But the land is called Subcon.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's Mario's dream has come to life. Oh, this one's a fun one. Okay, so our next fun fact. We mentioned Wart does not appear in any other Mario games, but he has an appearance in another one. Wart makes an
Really?
appearance in Link's Awakening.
You're right. He does.
Yep.
Holy crap.
The article reads, while Wart has yet to appear in another Mario game, the character did pop up in the 1993 Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, going under the name Mamu.
I forgot about that. And I even remember playing that game as a kid, and I thought he looks like the frog from Mario 2.
Yep, Mamu actually takes on the role of an ally, performing a song known as Frog Song of Soul.
Yep, you have to learn it to bring creatures back from the dead.
I took everything I had not to spoil that fun fact when you mentioned him not being in a Mario game. I'm like, oh, but he was in something else.
I feel like a failure now. I've completely forgot about that.
But like you said, if you didn't really know that's what they were going for, like you said, you'd just been like, oh, that looks like, but you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know that you should have jumped straight to the conclusion that it actually was supposed to be him until you found out,
Yeah, because I did think that, but then, like you said, he was under a different name. So I was just like, oh, maybe it was just inspiration.
The way you find out is that the name he went by, Mamu, is actually that character's name from Doki Doki.
Okay, cool.
Because
I
obviously
did
they
not know
changed the
that.
name.
Yeah.
This game helped to inspire a spin-off cartoon, which I watched.
The Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
Yep, the article reads, after massive success of both Mario Brothers games, a kid's cartoon was inevitable, is what it says. Therefore, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show was released in 1989. It had 65 episodes, aired between September 4th and December 1st of 1989. Though every other Friday, the episode was actually Legend of Zelda, which, by the way, was the one I liked. Like, the show was okay. The Legend of Zelda on Friday was the best.
That cartoon is, like, it's not great, but I still love it. it's so goofy, and it's like not at all how I would picture Link being. Like he's, and for those who have never watched the Legend of Zelda cartoon, you should look it up on YouTube. But Link is a total horn dog. It's like all he's wanting to do is get in Zelda's pants.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's so goofy. It's like it's funny, but I know it's ridiculous, so it doesn't like make me angry as a Zelda fan.
But it was weird though. It was a blend. So you had live action stuff and the cartoon. And I don't remember this as a kid, but looking into this when I was researching, those two guys who played Mario and Luigi were creepy looking. Like you look at them now, I was like, that was for kids.
So Mario was played by Captain Lou Albano, who was a wrestling manager in the 70s and 80s. I can't remember the gentleman's name who played Luigi, but I have a vague memory of watching that show on TV. You know, like I don't remember specific episodes, or like I can remember some moments, but I remember seeing a live action Mario and Luigi on TV, and then I remember the cartoon. And the funny thing with the cartoon is that Bowser was the primary antagonist, but it also included Mouser and Triclyde,
Yeah, they
which was a little weird.
They kind of picked and mix and match. They said no more words, but they the guys that survived in some ways survived all the way through. They had those in there. Um, and then we've got this is fun. The end credits had mistakes.
Really?
So so if you're watching the original, now this is not the All Star because that actually gets corrected by then, but the new character Alberta, referred to as Catherine in the Japanese games, had its name swapped with Ostro in the final credits. Um, Especially since the gender it caused confusion because the gender Alberta was already ambiguous in the character being described in the instruction manual as a male who thinks he's a girl, and which I'm reading that now and like that did not age well, and that he would rather be called Bernita. So there was some confusion that. Also, Claw Grip was misspelled without the
That
R.
that was the other villain that I couldn't remember, was the giant crab.
And Hopster or Hoopster was referred to as Hopster. They missed one of the O's.
Things get lost in translation.
None of those were corrected until the All Star release, and then they fixed them for the All Star release.
Oh, good.
But I can imagine being, especially at that age, thinking of one character, that's Berta. Like, no, right there, it says it's not.
Yeah. Like, no, but it says it there, so it's got to be true.
Many brothers have argued and lost, I bet you, because of that.
Oh, sure. I like to think that the argument then comes back years later after All Stars comes out and it's corrected, and the brother who initially was wrong was like, "See, you were wrong."
How lost in the wilderness were we before the internet? Because I'm that age range, so I remember having to look stuff up in the encyclopedia. But God, that sucked compared to I can just Google it on my phone right now.
Yeah, I think my generation is probably the last that grew up without a cell phone, that really grew up without. Well, I think I was 11 or 12 when we got our first computer, so I wasn't really exposed to the internet until I was like 12, 13 years old.
Oh, high school for me, high school. Unless you count, my dad had Prodigy back when I was in middle school, Prodigy Net, which was like a AOL before AOL was around. It was basically just an online message board.
Those were the days, and when you had the dial-up internet and you had to hear that.
Yes.
Like, Mom, get off the phone. I need to use the internet.
And downloading music on Napster when it would take like 8 hours for a song.
Oh man, Napster, LimeWire, all those.
Well, see, Napster just took a long time. LimeWire was great because it would take forever, and you'd get a virus and kill your computer at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. So if you want to get a new computer, just download LimeWire and you can kill your current one.
LimeWire taught what LimeWire taught me was what file extensions meant. Because before I learned that, I couldn't tell you how many times I was like, I'm downloading AC/DC. Click open the file. No, that's porn. It's porn. And my computer is now dead.
Like, wait, what is an MP3? What does that mean?
But now you know that, but you were looking at it before and you didn't know that I didn't know what .mov meant versus MP4 versus. So I thought it was an audio file and it's MP4 and it's like I said, it's loaded up with pornography and viruses.
Yeah, my 12-year-old me was like, "What's this dot mauve thing that I keep seeing? I
Um,
don't get it."
so there, just one more fun fact,
Yeah, yeah,
and that is, and this is actually more of a cool fact than a fun fact, but this is one of the first games to have a playable female character, and it's actually
yeah.
kind of cool it happened this early, but also like that's weird that because this is before Samus, who famously was hidden as a female character because we wouldn't buy the game otherwise because we were assholes.
I'm still a little surprised, and I think this is going to happen eventually. That there hasn't been some type of Metroid movie or series.
It seems like a property that's ripe for it.
Jason and I have talked about this. It needs to be a live action movie in the style of Alien.
Oh, I would dig that. And you know this between our conversations. I'm not a huge Sonic fan. I'm not a huge fan of the movies, which I did finally watch, by the way. Um, but what I'm happy about is that they're doing so well that we can showing studios you can do video game movies well.
The same thing happened with comic book movies.
Yes,
You look at like the failed attempts of Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four and the from the 70s to the 90s, and then Blade happened and it did fairly well. And then X-Men came out in 2000 and that just
game changer.
yeah, just blew the roof off. And you could you imagine the state of movies right now without the MCU?
Oh, I could, but it's not happy.
Yeah.
Um,
And now it's and you look how successful. And I'm not saying that video game movies would be as successful as the MCU, but now that we've seen with Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 that you can adapt the properties and do them well,
and there's
and they will do
stories
well at the box office.
there's stories out there and stories that haven't been told because a big problem right now is that a lot of stuff we get is recycled. Reboots are big, which is fine. Sometimes I'm a firm believer you shouldn't reboot it unless technology is going to make it better. So yes, I've seen clips of the '70s Spider-Man where he's swinging around on a literal rope. That needed to be done with CGI. But movies that aren't heavily influenced with effects, I don't think you should reboot them just because you can.
Yeah.
Now, unless the
No,
movie
I
sucked
respect.
and then make it better,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. No, I respect that. But I think we're in an age now where like a live action Metroid could work
Oh
or
yeah,
do like a Zelda series. Like I go back and forth on whether or not I'd want it to be animated or in live action. But I think that would
both.
have to, yeah, or both. Yeah, why not both? I do think it would have to be a series though.
And
Like
here's the
you,
best part about Zelda is it's perfect for right now when we're doing Marvel and DC multiverses because Zelda timeline's basically a multiverse. It's different timelines.
mhm.
It's all built around around Ocarina and that time frame based on your choices or not your choices, but basically there's different timelines spurring from that one.
I remember as a kid thinking, how do these games all make sense? Because there's Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, but they're all in completely different situations. Hyrule looks completely different.
Well, like I said, after Ocarina of Time, they have offshoots. So, like Breath of the
Mhm.
Wild is not the same time frame as some of the other ones, or the timeline. And unless I'm mistaken, the first Zelda is still the oldest one, is it not? As far as
So
the timeline goes.
if we're talking in chronological order, Skyward Sword is the first
Oh,
because,
that's right, because it's the origin of the Master Sword.
yep, and the foundation of Hyrule.
But again, the first Zelda is the last, is the oldest basically. It happened after everything else still.
So, if I remember right, and this is just me going off the top of my head, there's the three branches from Ocarina. There's when Link defeated Ganon and then went back to relive his childhood, which that resulted in Twilight Princess and a couple of others after that. Then you had the adult timeline where it was still the world of where adult Link beat Ganon, but he left, and that's where Wind Waker was
Mhm.
spawned from. Then you had where Link is killed by Ganon, and the sages seal him away in the sacred realm, which then becomes the Dark World,
Mhm.
which we saw in Link to the Past. I believe it's after Link to the well, no, it's after Ocarina in that timeline of where the original Zelda takes place.
because we're back to talking
It's
about Zelda.
it's all confusing. I have a theory. I think Breath of the Wild actually unites the entire timeline, and I hope that's explained in the sequel.
I hope, you know what I hope is explained in the sequel, or not explained but fixed? Weapons.
Yes.
I still haven't beat Breath of the Wild, and I got to go back and do that. But oh my god, it's so annoying. You get a weapon you love, and you swipe it 3 times, and it's broken.
And it just, yeah, it sucks.
It's insane. I'm telling you.
Yeah, there's a few changes that I would like them to make, and I hope they do. I would also like to see dungeons back. Like the shrines were cool, but like that's what makes Zelda fun is going into the different dungeons, solving the different puzzles and whatnot. Like that's what makes Zelda great.
Okay, real quick before we jump on to our last section here, am I the only one who played Link to the Past by going to all the dungeons, getting the stuff out of it, but not beating the dungeon, and then going back to the first dungeon, like all the equipment and hearts?
I would love to do that. Actually,
that's how I played that game.
Really? Oh, that's sick.
You can't do it in the first 3, but when you get into the open world, you can pretty much, I don't remember, there might be an exception, but I don't think there is. You can pretty much go into every single one, get your weapon, but don't beat it, and then go out. And then you get to be Super Link at the first dungeon with all the weapons.
I'm gonna have to try that now. That'll add a new layer to playing that game again. Because Link to the Past is one of those games, and Super Mario World's another one too, that I like to go back like once a year or once every other year and just play through it because those are my 2 favorite games of all time. But yeah, that adds a new element to it. That's really cool. I've never thought to do that.
I to some extent, you can't do it with Ocarina as far as the temples, but you can go and get like all the heart pieces that are floating around. Mm-hmm. And I like being Super Link. But anyway, I was purposely keeping our discussion somewhat short, that we talked about Zelda for half the time, because I wanted to talk to Derek here about some of his projects. I had the pleasure of watching the Parker Syndrome. I did not call it project this time. This morning, and that was your first film, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's the story on the Parker Syndrome? Where did that come about?
So the Parker Syndrome, it initially started, and I'll tell the Reader's Digest version of this, but when I graduated college in 2008, I was just wanting to make something. And a bunch of my friends were like, oh, well, we should make a movie. Like it's something you want to do. Like it's what you want to do as a career. So why don't you do it? So we came up with this story that eventually became the Parker Syndrome, and we filmed it over like a couple of months span because we could only film like 1 day a week. So we stretched that out from like August to November, December, put it together, and then, moved on to a couple of other projects. Fast forward to years later, I worked on our mutual friend Steve Wise's film Survey. And I really didn't have much aspiration to do film because I was so busy with my job with the Blue Wahoos, and I was, in the heart of doing, 3 to 4 podcasts a week. So it didn't really cross my mind. But once I got on the set of Survey, it kind of reawakened that in me. So I went back and I watched the original Parker Syndrome, and I was like, well, if I were to make this now, I would change, this. I'd, probably cut that character. I might add something here. And then I thought, well, why don't I do it? Yeah. So I rewrote it as a short, because the original Parker Syndrome is like a 45-minute movie. This was cut down to about 15 minutes. And then we filmed it in December of 2018, and then premiered it a few months after that, and then got to submit it to festivals. It got to win some cool awards, which I'm very proud of. But I think what I'm the most proud of is the fact that I was the director, but I was probably the least experienced person on set. So I had Steve, I had Kevin Almodovar, who's the director of photography, and several others really, helped me gain confidence as a filmmaker.
Steve is amazing as a resource. He's helping me out with something that I'm writing right now. Like he's just a great person. You guys know he was on the show a few weeks ago, but I love Steve.
Yeah, no, Steve is, I consider him to be one of my best friends. We don't just talk film, like, we'll just talk about whatever. And it's kind of crazy because I met him right before the first Pensacon, but I don't think it was until he was on the Derek Diamond Experience show a couple of times before we really started to kind of connect and then become, the friends that we are now.
He's my Pensa boss.
He is that. Yeah. No, Steve is he's amazing at so many things. Like he's a great writer. He's also very organized because he was my assistant director for the Parker Syndrome, and he was the one who kept the project rolling, making sure things were getting done on time and efficiently. So no, I can't say enough good things about Steve.
Yeah, and he gives no qualms about just helping out. Just literally, I mean, I literally sent him stuff. I'm like, hey, does this suck? And he gave me detailed stuff. Like, no, it doesn't suck, but you need to fix this, and I'm like, awesome. He's a great guy.
That's what's great about him is that he gives constructive feedback. Like he doesn't just say, oh well, this is terrible.
Right.
Like he'll say like, maybe you should add this, and it usually works out that he's right.
So you have a new project, which, okay, I was hoping that since it's called The Feature, that it was going to be a feature length. But I did catch, on your social medias that it is a short, but you are working on another project.
So initially, it's gone through a couple of different name changes. It was originally called The Film Project, but I was like, it's kind of bland. And then I thought, well, why don't I try and be, like artsy and fancy and call it The Short? But then I was like, it doesn't really have much of a ring to it. And then I switched to The Feature because the story it's about a aspiring filmmaker who wants to do film, but he's been afraid to do it. Like we all know the story of, you want to do something and then life gets in the way and you usually don't end up pursuing whatever dream it is that you want. Well, he ends up doing that through the help of his best friend, who I'm trying not to give any spoilers, but there's a bit of a love story involved as well, and not just an aspiring filmmaker story. So it's been a lot of inspired stuff from like my past experiences, from experiences I've heard from other filmmakers about their struggles, and kind of combining it all together. And I've always been fascinated with movies about filmmaking and about the filmmaking industry, and I wanted to do something like that. And I feel like now is the time for me to do that. And it's been, almost 4 years since we filmed the Parker Syndrome. So I've really been getting that itch to make something else.
You do it. Because I've said over and over, this is my year of learning new things. And I'm trying to write something for the first time in my life. You've got your movie going. Jason Robbins, our mutual friend, your co-host on Nerd Cave Retro, was talking about doing more with his projects. Like, we all need to just do our stuff.
Well, and now that, and I'm not saying COVID is completely over, but things aren't shut down like they were 2 years ago. So, and it's great to hear, like not just us, but other people I know are also getting their projects back off the ground. So it's good that all the creativity is happening again.
Absolutely.
I love it.
So you start filming next month, correct?
We're looking to film either the first or second weekend in August. It'll be filmed in Pensacola. And then from there, I will hope to have it edited probably by the fall. And then once that's done, I'll submit it to festivals and I'll do some kind of premiere in town. So,
well, you never answered the message, but you have a free lackey who will, make coffee and learn how to do things.
Well, there are a couple of scenes that are in need of extras. So if you want to,
I will volunteer for extra. No, nothing further than that. I mean, learn. I would love to learn, like be on a set and learn stuff, but extra I can handle. I don't think I could act. I don't think I could act.
Well, I'll tell you off air what's needed. But no, if you wanna come on set just to learn, like you're more than welcome to. Like I'm not one of those directors that's like, oh, only certain people are allowed on set. So no,
I would love to see how like sound works. I'd love to see lighting things and how the camera works and works. You like that?
Yeah, for sure.
Learn all the things.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I've gotta like see if you're a good director or not, because if I ever do manage to write my stuff, maybe I want to use Derek Diamond.
Oh, you're too kind. I do feel, I will say I feel much more confident about this movie than I did Parker Syndrome, because I'd never done it before. And not a lot of people know, but the first day of shooting, I actually like I had a mild anxiety attack before we started, because I was just so like I had like 50,000 things going through my brain, and then it was just like
I
it
mean,
just
it's your
kind of
first
shut down.
time, and it's a lot going on. And also, like I said, I watched it today. You're writer, director, and producer. Did you have any other people working with you?
Steve helped me out a lot with the scheduling, but as far as and he helped me out with some of the scenes as far as writing goes. But yeah, a lot of it I wound up doing on my own.
That was a lot
And
of hats to put on.
and thankfully with the feature, I've got my friend Chad Sanders is producing it, and he's been helping out a lot with it. So it's been good to have help, and my wife Samantha has been helping me out with it as well. So
Excellent.
it's nice to not have to wear as many hats.
Well, so there's no trailers obviously yet, but in the show notes I'll put Anchor of Reality, which is the your production company.
Mm-hmm. Anchor of
Um,
Reality Productions.
I'll give those links in the show notes, as well as link specifically Parker Syndrome, so people can check it out.
No,
Um,
thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything coming up? This episode's going to air for us about a week and a half from now. So not this Friday, but the following Friday. Anything you got coming up or things going on that you want to plug?
Just as always, you can check out myself and Jason Robbins over on the Nerd Cave Retro Show. Our show airs Monday nights at 6 p.m. Central Time on Jason's Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/jfunktastic. If you've never listened to the show, we discuss retro gaming news. We'll usually do a gaming history segment, and then we'll alternate reviewing a classic retro game from the 80s, 90s, or 2000s. You can follow the show on social media at Nerd Cave Retro on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also check out my other show, the Feature Presentation Podcast, where I discuss the inner workings of the filmmaking industry. I'll interview directors, actors, writers, just about their careers and advice they give for aspiring filmmakers. Because I use the show as a means to educate myself and hopefully educate those who want to learn more about filmmaking. That show airs Monday nights as well at 8 p.m. on the Feature Presentation YouTube channel. And then the audio version is out the following day on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast. And you can follow the show on social media at Feature Pres Pod.
Excellent. And of course, always you can follow us on Twitter. I'm still in my brain want to say Twitch because we just stopped going live. But Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jester's Court Pod. Give us check us out, give us a follow. You can see what's going on. Derek, thank you so much for coming on and talking
Absolutely.
Mario
No,
Brothers and other things.
absolutely. No, anytime you want to have me on, just let me know.
We will take each other up on those offers. That's it for the show, guys. Thanks and good night.